Excuse me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 2024 meeting of Triangle Association of Freelancers. My name is Don Vaughn, and our special guest this evening is independent filmmaker Dustin Ferguson. I had the pleasure of interviewing Dustin for Videoscope magazine and was just genuinely intrigued by his career, the many movies that he's made, the different eclectic areas of filmmaking that he's been involved in. So I asked him to join us for a meeting, and he said yes. Dustin, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my honor.
I want to begin by asking you to just kind of tell us how you got into filmmaking. What were you? Where was your life when this became part of it?
Well, I grew up a fan of horror films. I actually kind of obsessively collected them growing up. I ended up getting in the local paper for having 5,000 horror movies in my collection. And so I was really into it. And that actually sort of led to me editing my own versions of movies where I would take like horror films and put the deleted scenes back in and make composites of movies and stuff just for like personal viewing. And I started putting them out on the internet for free. And someone in Australia actually discovered me that way and offered me an editing job on the movie Sleepaway Camp 4. And that's what opened the door. After I did that, I went on, he produced my first feature film like 2 years later. And I kind of just grew into an obsession since then.
How long have you been making films?
17 years,
Can I ask how old you are?
41.
When we talked for Videoscope, I think you told me at that point that you had around 140 motion pictures under your belt.
I have 145 now.
How how can you make so many movies like that? What is your process and what drives you for that?
I think a genuine love and passion for what I do is the driving force. I've kind of developed a routine, with the films as far as doing multiple projects at one time. So, like, we'll go down to the studio and shoot scenes for three different movies at once if they involve a lot of the same actors. So that's kind of how I plan out the films. Is like I'll have one actor that appears in three different movies, so we can get him that day and shoot all the stuff for those three movies. So typically, I always have stuff that's getting done at different stages of production, so I don't really get bored with any one thing, and I can stay motivated by just bouncing between the different ones.
What was the first movie you made?
The first film I made was a movie called Terror at Black Tree Forest in
Tell us about
2009.
that experience.
Uh, it was that was my film school. I didn't actually go to film school. I went to school for business management. I got my entrepreneurship degree because I actually planned to open a video store. I think I told you about that. I ended up doing it later in life, actually. But so in the meantime, I just kind of started as a fan and I was learning how to operate a camera. And I got my coworkers at Godfather's Pizza to come be the actors in the movie. And we shot a lot of it like on my dad's property. We went out to some national parks. And I just kind of learned the whole process that way from just being a fan of films myself, trying to kind of mimic the stuff that I liked growing up and make a movie that was similar. And so the whole thing was really just a learning process. And it's funny because I've done, 145 movies since then. And it's still one of the most memorable ones, I think, just because I learned so much and it's still vivid in my mind.
What you make low budget films out of necessity. What is the smallest budget that you have worked with that has resulted in a film that actually had distribution?
Notoriously, I was hired in 2015 to make a movie called Camp Blood 4, and I was given $200 and I had to shoot it in 2 days. And the day we went to go shoot, the producer asked me if I could split it in half into two movies and make a part four and part five with no extra money. And being, young and naive and inexperienced, I agreed to it. And I made a movie on $200, two of them.
That's amazing. I don't know how you can do that.
It's not my proudest work, but I'm proud of the fact I was able to pull it off and it got distribution and it's part of a franchise and people have seen them.
That's true. Who are your cinema inspirations, Dustin, as far as both directors and screenwriters? Because you do both now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of like directors that are like all in one like that. That kind of do like the writing and the shooting and the directing, like people like John Carpenter and Dario Argento, and also more modern people like Rob Zombie and Quentin Tarantino. I think I really like highly visualized kind of art, stuff that has like its own stamp of uniqueness on it. And I think that those are some directors that when you watch anything they made, you know that they made that movie. And so that's kind of where I gravitate towards with my style of filmmaking.
Um, you work a lot. Your style of work reminds me of Roger Corman a lot.
Yes,
Like
that
making,
is.
like
I've
as
been
you were
called the new Roger
saying,
Corman a lot.
filming three an actor in three separate movies all at the same time. Um, do you is that accurate? Would you say that you're in the same school with
Yeah,
Roger?
I think I learned to do this from him and all his proteges, like Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski and David Dakota. That was a generation above me. And so those were the movies that I grew up on and kind of like could see how they were made and how they were done on a low budget, what they must have done to pull them off. And but it's funny because I don't think anybody really, like you said, it's not a necessity. I don't think anybody starts out going, I'm going to be a low budget movie director. It's just that's what happens, like that's what you end up working with. And I think because I do so many so fast, I've just ended up, that's what I'm known for. I've done so many. And I think that it's very similar in style to Roger Corman in that we do that. We kind of have like a home base. We use a lot of the same people. We go through multiple projects at once and we really grind this stuff out. And a lot of it is just learning from that too, because I want to take what my forefathers, in the genre have done and proven that can be done and really make a career for myself and put my own abilities to use so that I can earn a living doing what I love. And so I've kind of taken what they've done and done it in a modern sense, more mobile now in today's day, the digital age.
I think when we spoke, you said that Spider Baby's budget was around 60 or 80,000. Is
60, yep.
60?
Which is the
Was
most,
that
and
one of the larger budgets you
most of
worked
that
with?
was to buy the rights. So
I'm
it was
sorry,
a lot less.
say it again.
A lot of that budget was to buy the rights. So what
Oh,
we actually
right.
shot was drastically.
Is the way you approach Spider Baby significantly different from the way that you addressed your very first films? Obviously, you were learning back then. You were a novice filmmaker, still getting your feet wet, learning the craft. Are you a different filmmaker today than you were, say, 5 or 10 years ago?
I'm self-aware now, and I don't think that people really start out that way. I think that it took a lot of experience and learning from my own mistakes and putting a lot out there and getting feedback to kind of like figure out who I am as a filmmaker and how people see me. So I think I have the benefit of years of experience in films that have experienced to make me grow as a filmmaker so that I can make, I guess, a more aware film and a better film technically. But it did feel very much like my first movie with in regards to the passion I had for it because so much of the stuff I do is routine. It's you know I, I do two types of films. I do like the stuff for my own company, SoCal Film Studios, which I consider more like my art and my real work. And then I do stuff for Wild Eye Releasing. That's a lot of like CGI crazy monster stuff. And so I think that in the midst of doing over 100 of those, you kind of just get lost in the routine. It doesn't really feel like it's as passionate. And so I think with Spider Baby, that was me reigniting the passion I had for film. My intention in making it was to make a film I was passionate about.
That's obvious. And watching the movie, your passion for this film, which is an iconic horror film directed by Jack Hill, is really evident. You update it, but you retain the essence of the original, and you add to the characters and the story in a very significant way. And it's very well done from beginning to end, I felt. And I especially like the bridges between yours and the old, such as bringing in Beverly Washburn, who was a significant character in the original version.
Mm-hmm.
And Lon Chaney Jr.'s grandson also has a small role in it. Tell us a little bit about the importance of making the old new again.
Because I'm a fan, I don't really believe that you can remake a classic and do a better job. So that wasn't like my intention with doing it. I think some people perceive that that would be my intention, but I'm just a huge fan of the original, and I wanted to just honor the original and bring people, back to checking out the original film after they see mine. Because the original one just kind of just gets lost in time. It's not as accessible to a younger crowd, and so I think just bringing it in a little bit more modern times to bring awareness to it but still showing my passion by doing things like having Beverly and Ron involved and Jack obviously producing shows to the hardcore fans, the people fans of the original that I took it serious, that I'm not out there trying to make something I think is better or like a cash grab. I'm doing it from the heart. Like I wouldn't want, as a fan myself, for someone to remake a movie if they didn't have heart.
Let's talk a little bit about promotion. Um, because we're all writers. If you're writing a novel or short stories, promotion is everything. Slightly less for what I do, but still you need to get your name out there. You need to make editors aware of your availability. How do you promote the movies that you make? How do you make the general public aware of their existence?
I kind of just do grassroots starting with Facebook. I have a really big presence there and I've kind of built my audience there. And I think that that's the best thing you can do is cultivate an audience for your work specifically. And I use social media, which is very new and modern, to do that in a way that I can connect with my fans so that they feel like they personally are my friend and they want to support me. So like almost anything I do, I sort of have a guaranteed group of people that are going to go buy it because they know me and they're my friend and they talk to me every day and interact with me. And so that's sort of like what I've used in my situation to really elevate the audience and the ability to earn a living on it. I think if you're faceless, people are less interested. People want a personal connection. And I think in today's day and age, especially with celebrities, they don't usually interact with their fans or have anything to do with social media actually. And I think that's where I'm different because I want people to know that I'm also still a person and I'm also still a fan, and then they'll want to support me in that way. And so it starts with Facebook. I do all the typical things like the horror websites and magazines that promote my stuff. But I think that really the core group of people who are always supporting me are the people I deal with every day on Facebook that follow me there.
I want to talk about screenwriting because there's a number of aspiring screenwriters in this organization. And we've had some screenwriters present at our annual writing conference to standing room only. So there's genuine interest in this. You told me earlier before we started the meeting that you've been writing the scripts to all of your films for the past several years. How do you approach screenwriting? Um, and your movies have really distinct titles. And I was curious whether you come up with a title and write the story to the title, or if you come up with a premise first, write the script, then add the title to it. What is your approach?
It usually starts with an idea, like an idea of the type of thing that I want to make, which, because I'm a fan, is usually inspired by other art or things that I think are trendy or exciting to make. And that will usually lead to a title and artwork. I think it's important to put out imagery at the beginning of a project you're serious about because generating the interest can also serve as motivation for yourself. And so I often do that. And then once I've done that, I start generating the ideas of the film based on the reception and the imagery that I've created for myself on the film. So I'll go and I'll make like an outline typically that's just like a page or 2 pages that's like the sum of what the script will be. And then I literally will sit down and about a day to 2 days, I'll write the whole script. I'll just go in and I'll fill in the in-betweens, the dialogue, what's happening in between each scene until I've got, 50 to 100 pages.
Do you work by yourself or do you often have collaborators?
No, see, and that's why I write for myself because what I've learned for me, because I do so many projects, it's difficult for me to work off other people's scripts because you have to have a very intimate understanding of the story and have your head wrapped around it. And so I just logistically, it's hard for me to sit down and like familiarize someone else's script that they've written and the ideas and concepts that they have, and then be able to go and portray it accurately when I'm also doing 4 or 5 other things. So for me, if I write my own scripts, it's already in my mind already because I came up with the idea. So it's a lot easier for me to wrap my head around it and go execute something without feeling like I'm getting lost in all this paper I'm supposed to be following.
Do you have any advice for the aspiring screenwriters in our organization, based on your career, how you started, where you are now? From that lifelong experience, what advice can you offer others who may just be getting, or don't, have no credits, but they feel they've got a good script or a good story to tell? What advice would you offer these people?
I think the sad reality is that in today's day and age, there's probably more writers than there are filmmakers, and I think that there's a lot of people now that are going in and self-producing and making their own stories and picking up a camera and making their own things. And I think that a lot of writers can get discouraged if they make something that doesn't get picked up or no one seems interested in creating it. And to those people, I think that they should consider maybe doing it themselves or write something within the resources that they can reasonably get made themselves. And also in terms of like writer's block and stuff, like that's something I used to battle with a lot because you kind of have to sit down and pump out this script in 2 days for this thing I'm shooting in a week or whatever. And what I found, what really works for me anyways, that I've kind of noticed with time is that when you really do sit down and you just kind of start writing with your basic idea, it comes naturally. It just kind of like flows out of you. and it's easy to get lost in the story just as you can see it happening in your head and what the dialogue would be and what you imagine happening in that scenario. And for me, I've always based characters and scenarios on things I'm familiar with. So that really helps with like the overall execution of what I'm trying to do. Because I have a better understanding of how something would play out or how a type of person would react to a certain situation. Especially if I'm also directing, I will have specific people in mind for certain characters because I know that they're going to convey that character.
Do you find as the screenwriter, does that make your job as director easier? I mean, I'm assuming that you kind of have blocked the whole movie in your head kind of
Mm-hmm.
while you're writing the script before you even get behind the camera.
Yeah, and my scripts tend to have a lot of the notes with in regards to how things are going to be shot. So that way, it's kind of like an all-in-one for me. Like I know what the dialogue is, I know what the setup is, I know what the shots are, and I kind of know what order we're doing things in. And so it is easier for me because it's so much easier to break down that way. I can copy and paste things into a new document in the order that I need, and I'm very familiar with the material already. Because continuity is a big thing in movies. Like it's easy on paper to have things have continuity, but when you're shooting things out of order, things get lost, and you're like, wait, what outfit were they wearing in the scene? Is this the second day or the first day? And you start panicking because, there's this whole script and you can't remember it. We shot things out of order. So that can be, I think, the difference. It makes writing a lot easier that way, but that's something as a filmmaker I pay extra attention to. So I try and write things in an order that we're going to shoot all of these days with this outfit and then all of these days with this outfit. So you don't end up with continuity issues later.
How long did it take you to film Spider Baby?
A total of 3 days. And then we did like 2 or 3 days of pickups where it was just like a one or two little scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I would say under a week. And I think typically productions like this are about 2 to 3 weeks. And we did it, yeah, 4 days, 3 days.
Paul was wondering if you're familiar with Story Rocket, and if so, what your opinion is of that.
I feel like I've heard of it, but I'm not really familiar with what it is.
Paul, is that a screenwriting platform?
I've gotten a lot of uh, emails from Bowker, which is the ISBN company, and they promote it as a way to get to a lot of screens or either screenwriters or directors or whatever as a way to get your story out. And so it's mostly
Okay, I do know
writers.
of it then. Yeah, I do know of that. There's a few of them like that. I'm actually a member of this one that's like that called Virtual Pitch Fest, where people submit their screen. You guys
Yeah.
should all look into that too. Like if you haven't heard of it, yeah, it's just like that where you join it. I think it's free to join, and you just submit your scripts, and they go out to all these interested filmmakers to take a look at it, consider.
Okay. Well, the Bowker thing's not free.
Oh, okay.
They charge you, and you create this pitch basically with their stuff, and it goes into a database that's supposedly looked at by lots of people.
Okay. Okay.
So just wondering if it was because I think what I'm writing might fit well with that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage any avenue to get your stuff out there, especially in today's oversaturated market. You got to put it in front of as many eyes as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, if it's not out there, it's not going to get picked up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Dustin, what's your favorite thing about being an independent filmmaker?
Oh gosh. The freedom to be an artist who earns a living doing what they love. I think that that's everybody's dream, no matter what their passion is, to be able to just literally go do what they love and get paid for it. And so in my case, it just happens to be filmmaking because I'm a big fan. And so that's also my driving force in the hard times. I will remind myself why I'm doing this and how lucky I am to be in this position and how grateful I am. So it's definitely my favorite part.
You're in California, right? California is a big union state, a lot of guilds. How do you work around having to work with like the Screen Actors Guild and situations like that as an independent filmmaker, not affiliated with a major studio?
That's just it. You kind of have to pave your own lane. And that's just what I've done. I actually live in Riverside County where you don't need film permits. And so we've sort of like taken advantage of that. And so what I do is we'll book studio space and film in the studio, different studios in LA. But then when we have outdoor scenes, we do it out here in Riverside County. And so that way we kind of like can save money on that, in that way. I think that It wasn't always this easy though. I mean, I came from Nebraska. I moved out here 7 years ago, and filmmaking there was really hard because people don't take it serious there. It's kind of like, oh, sure, sure. What's your real job? Like people don't.
Your
It's a
cute
lot
little
more.
hobby.
Yeah, yeah. And I had made 50 films there before I moved here. I moved here after my 50th film, and I've made like 95 movies or something since then. And it's only been 7 years. So I've definitely found a rhythm to make it work. And I think that people overthink it. It's kind of one of those things like you just if you want to do it, you just have to physically get up and go do it, and then you're doing it. And that's just, I guess, what I do.
Does anyone have any questions for Dustin? This has been fascinating, dude. I wish we lived closer because I'd love to buy you a beer and just talk further about filmmaking and your career and all of that. I was curious, of your many films, what is the one film you're proudest of? And what film would you recommend those who would like to get to know Dustin Ferguson? What would you suggest they start with?
I mean, I think every artist would say their most recent work is their best work. And I mean, Spider Baby's a couple movies ago for me already, but it's the one I'm the most proud of because I think that I put the most effort into it. It meant the most to me. It was a big deal for me to do. And I really put in a huge amount of effort. I do so many movies that I do go bang out in like a day and add CGI to when they're done. And most of my movies I don't watch ever. Like I'll watch them to make sure they're complete and edited well, and I don't ever watch it again because I just have so many of them that I have to kind of separate myself from my art that way. But with Spider Baby, it's one I've seen many times, I'm proud of, and it's definitely the biggest and most important to me. And it's the one I would recommend for everybody to check out.
I think of all the movies you've made, my favorite title is Ebola Rex versus Murder Hornets. I
Yeah, you
got
know what I'm talking about.
Dustin, I got to ask you the genesis of that particular movie because the title just grabbed me so hard.
Okay, so in 2020, when the pandemic started, Hollywood completely shut down. And I actually got in the news, I kind of went viral for being the only filmmaker in the world making a movie at that time because my manager tells me this story often about like during the war, the only escape people had from the harsh realities was film. They would go to the theater and kind of that would be their escapism. And I think for a lot of people, 2020 was a really dark time. And I didn't want to fall off a cliff in my career because of the coronavirus. So I'm like, how can I make this work? So we started coming up with this new idea of doing remote filming for people, movies that were done through Zoom or where people could remotely shoot their scenes and have them added in later. So I started doing that. I did a movie called 5G Zombies that was about the 5G service turning everybody into zombies. And so people were able to film themselves with their cell phones for scenes in the movie. And that's how we made the whole film. And then that ended up leading to a movie called Ebola Rex, because at that point I was like, well, we should go with the times and what are the headlines? What are people talking about now? And so it always like a reflection of the coronavirus and everything that people were going through. So we made this cheesy movie called Ebola Rex, and it was one of the biggest movies I made. And it's really stupid and cheesy, but it was popular. And so we did a sequel because I did a movie called Murder Hornets after that. And then we did Ebola Rex versus Murder Hornets. And we kind of created the whole universe with these coronavirus era movies I did.
Which leads to
I did 20 movies that year, 20 movies in 2020.
wow.
So that's
Wow.
one of them.
And Nancy would like to know where we can see your movies. Are they on YouTube? Is there a particular, you have a website that we can go to if we want to see your work?
They're available everywhere. Tubi is the best place to go. I would say 25 or 30 movies on there, and Tubi's free to watch. Anybody in America can access it, and I believe Canada and Mexico. I have my stuff on Amazon Prime. A lot of my movies are available through any retailer. If you go to like Walmart.com or Best Buy or Amazon, you can buy them. And then I also have my own website. I do self distribution for like a lot of my movies on Blu-ray, and it's on Kunaki.com.
What's it again?
Kunaki. It's like a self publishing site. Okay. And so I have a lot of my own movies that I do through my own company available there.
Awesome. And Hannah wants to know the most challenging part of your job, and to you, what is the absolute most fun?
Okay, the most challenging part is keeping your sanity. I think that is, common with anything where you're juggling a lot of things at once and a lot of things are in motion. I think that in it, something people don't think about is what happens when the project is done. How is it received? What kind of criticism does it get? How does it affect your psyche? And I think when I'm doing so many movies and I have a lot of people that don't like cheap movies or don't like the types of stuff I do, It's become part of my career, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's the worst thing in the world to have to deal with, but it's probably the most difficult part of my career is just the criticism and dealing with accepting what I do and how I'm perceived. I think that my favorite thing is the camaraderie. I think I love the process of working on the film more than anything. Just getting together with like-minded people that are creatives that want to make something special. Because I really thrive to make every set a lot of fun, and I bring a lot of enthusiasm into my projects. And so I think that's why a lot of people return and work with me, because I have a very particular environment that's inviting. And I want that because I want life to be fun and exciting.
Brooke Stevens loves you. Brink Stevens loves you. She
I
really
love her.
does. I mean, when I interviewed her, she went to great lengths to talk about how much she enjoys working with you and just how much fun those sets are. So, yeah. And thank you for arranging that for me too, by the way. Does anyone
Yeah.
else have any questions for Dustin while we have him? Filmmaking, screenwriting, directing, anything at all?
I'm curious why horror?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, it started, like I said, as being a fan. I think what I like about horror is that it's exciting and it allows a lot of different types of ways to be creative. I think that in the confines of a drama or a comedy, you're very stuck within the walls of what creates that genre. And I think that in art, it allows you to be really artistic and creative, especially with how you arrange a suspense scene or how you execute a death scene or gore. And to me, it's sort of like riding a roller coaster. It's like exciting, but also safe because you kind of have the safety of your own home. And I just like being scared. And so for me, it's exciting to scare other people.
What
Do you think
films
it's
have,
always, oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
My name's Ambika. Um, it's my first time here. I was invited by one of my haiku students, actually. I'm not from the area. So, Dustin, why do you think people like being scared? And I do have another question after this.
Because I think it's a basic human emotion that if whether or not people like it or not, I think it's a necessity. I think that most people, it's like drugs or caffeine or alcohol. You know, you get a certain buzz from it, and it can be addictive to some people, and they don't even realize it. It's just it sparks some excitement, and so I think it's as exciting for me to make it as it is, for a lot of people to watch it.
Do you think that it's always the blonde girl who gets killed first?
No, and I think I'm trying to prove otherwise. Back in the day, it would be, yeah, the black guy gets killed first or whatever, and I think that those become certain expectations and tropes of horror. But I think we live in a time now that's very innovative and people are trying to create new ideas and create new genres. So I think that mold is breaking.
How old do you think a person should be before they should be exposed to something like a horror film?
I don't think it should be an age, it should be a level of maturity. I think it depends on the individual. I think that I was capable of watching horror at a young age and understanding and comprehending what was happening, but I know other people my age that weren't, that would be scarred and have nightmares from it. And so I think it's really at the discretion of the parents. I think that if the parents are with the kid and the kid is intelligent enough to understand what is happening and the parents can explain it to them, that kid could be 10 years old, as long as they understand that it's art and it's not affecting them a way it could affect another 10-year-old who doesn't understand it.
Are you, so I heard you say use the word cheesy. So
Yes.
are you going for that? Honestly, I haven't seen any of your films. I'm personally, I was traumatized by some Stephen King a long time ago. And
Traumatizing.
it's just not my thing, man. And I am the first to admit I write about death, but I wonder, what is it in the psyche of human beings that would choose looking at this stuff over learning more about love and relationships and communication?
I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's both. I think that it's just more evident if it's something gruesome because it stands out to people. I think that there's light and there's darkness and there's positive and there's negative. And I think that there's positive and negative aspects to both things. And so I think it's a natural curiosity for people to seek it out. And I think what is great about horror is it's a natural, healthy way to do it that doesn't hurt other people. It's sort of like you can satisfy that curious nature you have to see a dead body or to see how something might play out if you were stuck in that scenario without actually having to physically experience it. I think it can be therapeutic for that
So
reason.
you think it's positive to watch horror?
Yeah, I think if you understand, I think
Defend this. I would like to hear you defend how this is
I'll
possible.
defend it in a heartbeat. I've been a monster kid since I was 10 years old. I saw The Exorcist when I was 13, and came away with an appreciation for the story. I understand where Dustin's coming from as far as maturity. I think he's actually right on that. And a lot of kids are not as mature as they perhaps could be for their age. And those are the ones who probably should not see some of the more extreme efforts of horror that are out there.
well, and
I hear you.
that,
I pardon me, but I knew Linda Blair. That movie effed her up. She was
sure.
never the same after being in that.
But that's not just because it was horror. That was the circumstance of that production. They were rough. They did do things that were not normal at the time. They did subject a child to something that they weren't prepared to do, and there were things that went wrong on that shoot. But that's one circumstance. That's not every horror production. That's not every movie everybody's in. Linda Blair herself is a specific person that has a specific reaction to a specific situation. So it's not really fair to do like a blanket statement. It'd be like, oh, horror messes everybody up because Linda Blair got screwed up in The Exorcist. It's like The Exorcist will screw anybody up. I would be screwed up if I was on that set. I think anybody would.
Yeah.
But I think the proof is in the pudding, though, when you look at, I didn't turn out to be a serial killer, or I'm not harming people. I love animals. I turned horror into a career that I love and I earn a living on. So it has been positive. There's absolutely nothing negative for me watching horror movies since I was like 7 years old.
I think we could say it goes both ways. I don't think
That's what I'm saying. I think because I'm mature enough to handle it, it affected me positively. I think if someone subjected their kid to The Exorcist who's 6 or 7 years old and doesn't understand what's happening, that could mess them up. And that's what I'm saying too.
Anna wants to know who your favorite horror writer is.
Honestly, Stephen King. I think that he is somebody that resonates, with generations. I think that everybody can identify with his work. I think it stood the test of time. I think that he's someone that everybody in my generation kind of looks up to. So definitely him.
Are you a fan of Richard Matheson's work?
Yeah, I've seen some like made for TV movies and stuff that Richard's worked on. He's all right. He's no Stephen King.
I would disagree on that. I would encourage you to read his novels. I Am Legend, The Shrinking Man.
But see, I like the
I Am
story.
Legend is to me is a seminal and very important work in the genre, I think.
Oh, it is. It is. I think my favorite interpretation is actually a British movie called The Quiet Earth that was based on that film.
Really? I haven't seen that. I'll look for that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Does anyone else have any questions for Dustin?
I'll ask another one. Dustin, what do you think is more scary, when it's more inceptive or it's like slasher kind of stuff?
I mean, again, I guess it's circumstantial. It depends on what scares you. I think some people can watch a ghost movie and be really scared, and some people can watch a ghost movie and think it's really cheesy. I don't find certain things scary, and I find other things really scary. I think what works best in horror is something that people can resonate and identify with, no matter what the situation is. If it's something that they can see themselves in, or that feels like a realistic scenario to them, it can be trivial or it can be very extreme, but it could be the most effective that way when they can identify with it. So if someone has maybe a fear of being stalked, or they watched, somebody go through something where they're chased by a guy with a gun or a knife, that could then for them be scarier. So I think it really just depends, and that's why we have so many different types of horror, because it all affects people differently.
And there's different layers. There's different levels and extremes of horror also, and then you have horrible.
Sure, there's PG rated horror, and then there's X rated horror. There's definitely a huge variance.
Like R.L. Stine is if on a scale of 1 to 10, R.L. Stine is a 2, I think.
Yeah. But he's been criticized as being gateway horror, because I'm sure there's people of the camp that will look at Goosebumps and not want their kids to read it, because there are some heavy ideas in that. But at the same time, it is, from a broader perspective of horror, it's the most tamest. It's the most harmless of them, for sure.
Do you remember the first horror book you ever read?
Honestly, I grew up on Goosebumps. And so I had most of them. And then I also had Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I really loved those books because of the artwork. They were really well known for their really crazy, surreal artwork. And I think that that's what affected me. I've always sort of associated surrealism and sort of like spiritualism and otherworldly, ideas with horror, kind of cosmic stuff. I think because of stuff like that.
Wonderful. All right. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, Dustin, thank you so very, very much for joining us this evening. This was wonderful. Great fun to talk with you. A huge fan of your work. I got to find Ebola Rex versus Murder Hornets. I've got to watch that movie. And my wife's like, oh God, here we go.
You're subject her to that.
So that's what our marriage has been, is me basically subjecting her to all kinds of things. But actually, truthfully, she had never read horror science fiction when we met. I introduced her to those genres, and now she is the one with the massive collection of horror and science fiction. So I feel I did a good job as her husband introducing her to all of that stuff.
Awesome. No, I completely understand that. Everybody I've ever been with has been roped into my world. So
that's it exactly. Well, again, as I said, I wish you lived closer. I'd love to talk with you further on everything, but our thanks for joining us today. This was fascinating. It was really, really interesting, very insightful, and we appreciate your time very much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
You as well.
Really interesting. Fun stuff.
Thank you.